Hey gang, Kevin here, Life22, and tonight we are reviewing The Boy Crisis by Dr. Warren Farrell, PhD, and John Gray, PhD. I'm guessing it's Dr. John Gray, PhD. Um, but one of the things that I started reading this book, and it was recommendation by Dr. Jordan B. Peterson in I think it was when he spoke at Perth. He didn't either did an interview, or it was when he was on his Beyond Order book tour. And I had listened to I listened to a lot of Jordan Peterson, but I heard it from him, and he spoke about how he talked about the boy crisis, and how he met he talked about how he had met and interviewed Warren Farrell on his book, The Boy Crisis, and then referenced things from the book and highly recommended the book and just the topic in general. And so I went on Audible and I found the book and I added it to my reading list, and I just finished it, and it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal to the point that I feel like it changed my life. Like I'm processing how I am going to handle certain things if they go sideways in my life. Like a lot of people, like if you were to, something tragic were to happen, right? You were to lose a loved one, or you were to get divorced, or you were to lose your job, or whatever, like how would you react to it? And this book took me up a step on like how I should respond to any of those different things, and realizing that it actually puts my kids first. And obviously that's something that you just instinctively know as a parent, but sometimes you need reinforcement at that, right? And like this was like an eye-opening experience to where, like, when in one of his first couple chapters of the book, he talks about, like men's groups and things like that, but then he also talks about like our society's changing and how the feminist movement has actually gone beyond where it should have. It's kind of like the way he described it and how I took it was, it's kind of like when they created labor unions. Labor unions existed at one point because there were deplorable conditions. And there was, like an argument to be made that the wages didn't match the work that was being done, and there needed to be a collective bargaining unit. And then what happened was the lobby groups obviously started paying off politicians and getting them elected, and they came in and they started like giving more power to the unions, and so the employers had less power, and it went from being like employers had all the power to, and employees having zero power to like not equal. They started equaling out, and then they just kept going past it, because anytime that you create a construct, there always ends up being a power grab. And like one side gets a little bit more power, and it's like, well, why wouldn't you want to be on the more powerful side? So screw it, let's go, let's get more power. And so then all of a sudden they start getting way more power, and now it's like, unions beat up the employer, and it's like they do it to the point that they don't understand that an employer, if the employer disappears, they disappear, right? Like that's ta-da. Like, and then they're not necromancers, right? They can't just bring a business back to life. Like once you've killed it, you've killed it. So that's kind of a so to that understanding of like the progression of what unions have done, that's kind of what he was describing the feminist movement did, right? They said, you know what, hey, women don't have the right to vote, they don't have this, they don't have that, let's have a movement to try to fight for that. And then all of a sudden what happened was our entire society shifted, where women didn't have all these rights to now they have these rights, and now this, and masculinity is toxic, and they actually started beating down masculinity to the point that like if you're a boy in this world, you're vilified. Like it doesn't matter, you just say something wrong and blah blah blah. And it's it's like it's gone beyond equalization to the point that it just became a power shift, right? So like now if you're a male in society, you're the oppressed And he kind of talks about, like, that's how I took it. So now he talks about a lot of different things. Like, well, I mean, that's how I took it, and that's how a lot of different examples he gives in the book are, right? So, judges during a custody battle will automatically award custody to the mother. Like, typically, like 9 out of 10 times, 8 out of 10 times, they're going to give custody to the mother. The father could be an upstanding citizen. The mom could, be a horrible person. Could be a Casey Anthony-esque person. And the judge is always going to slightly lean towards the mother regardless. And that's what he pointed out some of those things. And so you get those trends in society where all of a sudden now the children are going to entirely the mother. Or you talk about a lot of our social programs where like the incentive structures of the welfare system, for example. Like, the first chance that, like, a couple argues, if mom kicks dad out of the house, the sole income winner is gone. And now, like, all of their food, their expenses, their rent, everything is paid for by the government now. So it almost incentivizes fatherless homes, right? Because typically a traditional family, the mom stays at home and the father went to work. So what happened was during the 1970s and 80s and into the 90s, we had all these skew shifts. And then you had all these, the child support went to the person who didn't have custody of the kids and was, or went to majority of the person making the income, which was the father. So now all of a sudden the father has all these giant boulders of responsibility on his shoulders. Not that they didn't exist in the first place, but now they've compounded it with you have to pay child support. And it can be the same as, if not greater than your income. And it's like, well, now and there wasn't as much free legal help for the fathers. So now all of a sudden, like, dad goes to jail, loses his driver's license, so he loses his job. Now he can't pay his child support. Now he doesn't pay his child support, he goes to jail. That sounds fair, right? Now a father in jail. Now at that time, being a child that was raised during divorce, I happen to know a little bit about this, and having owned companies that had guys that were getting wages garnished and stuff like that for child support. I know a little bit about the system, but I know that as soon as you go to jail, you're supposed to file an income change with family court. Most people don't do that because they're not aware of this. Nobody gives the father a crash course on this stuff, and there isn't as much legal help for the fathers out there that are being thrown in jail because they're just deadbeats, right? They're scumbags. We don't need to support them, right? We don't need to give them any kind of help from our society. So that's kind of where part of it comes from, right? So then you have all these fathers in jail. Well, you have all these kids growing up without fathers. Well, if masculinity is toxic, I guess that would be a better solution, right? Wrong. What ends up happening is that there are a lot of studies, and Dr. Warren Farrell points all this stuff out in the book, and he goes, studies are showing that children below the age of 10, during their developmental years, are very influenced by having fathers in the home, between rough and tumble play, male figures to look up to, what a little girl should look for in a man, what little boys should look to be a role model to what a man should be, things like that, and just all of the effects of a father. And he points this out specifically in the book, that a father is not more important than a mom, but a mom is not more important than a father. They are equally important in a child's life. He also points out that during the 90s, the kids, and I grew up with this, right? Like, the courts are always fighting. Well, it's better that the kids live in one home. It's better that the kids don't commute than to split time. And that was like the method of family courts in the 90s when I was growing up. And he said that, and he goes, that was the way the courts were going. Well, guess what? The studies don't show that. It is better to have a kid have equal time with both parents than it is beneficial that they don't have to relocate once a week, right? So it is better by far that the parents equally raise the children than it is, if you can't keep the parents in the same household, than it is if you were to say, well, they should go live with one parent so they don't have to commute every week or whatever, and they can just visit once in a while. Well, that ended up being more detrimental to children's health. Then here's how he points